Welcome back. The Pietermaritzburg High Court has now struck from the roll the bid by the former President Jacob Zuma to privately prosecute the prosecutor, Advocate Billy Downer, and the journalist Karyn Maughan. Zuma has claimed that Downer caused his personal medical information to be passed to Maughan illegally. So far as I understand it, he's produced no proof that any law was broken. Both Maughan and Downer have denied wrongdoing. Well, Karyn Maughan, the journalist at the centre of this, joins us now. She's a legal affairs journalist at News24, has, of course, been reporting on the Zuma cases for many years. Karyn, good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us. So then, what is your understanding of this decision today? At the moment, is it correct to say that you and Downer don't face any charges as part of Zuma's applications?
Well, I think the important thing to stress here is that Judge Nkosinathi Chili did emphasize that should the former president's efforts to appeal against the full bench decision that invalidated the summons that the former president had issued against us, we would then be required to, report to the court for that private prosecution to resume. So the case has been struck from the roll. We are no longer expected to appear. Our lawyers are no longer expected to appear. But he was at pains to say that should the former president succeed in his appeals, we will be then required to report again to the court for the resumption of that case.
From what I can see, there have been several appeals in different courts. Some of it can be quite confusing. Where is the situation now? The former president is appealing the last decision, or he's intending to at least. Is that right?
Well, there's two tracks. First of all, we brought an application to have the private prosecution declared an abuse of court process and set aside. That succeeded. The court obviously finding that there was no basis for a private prosecution, that there was no confidential information that was so-called quote-unquote leaked, that these were public documents, that, in any event, Advocate Downer had not been the person that provided those documents to me. So there was a whole very substantive finding that there was basically no basis to the prosecution, and that in effect it was part of the former president's Stalingrad strategy of utilizing litigation to avoid his day in court. That decision, we then brought an application for enforcement of it, which was upheld by the Supreme Court of Appeals. So there have been now 3 judgments in our favor, and then the former president has sought to bring about 3 different appeals which have been dismissed. The enforcement appeal he took to the Supreme Court, to the Constitutional Court, was dismissed because the court said it didn't have jurisdiction to hear the case. He is now attempting to seek challenge the SCA's reconsideration of its refusal to consider his appeal. He's now trying to appeal that in the Constitutional Court. So, there are still appeals at play, but regardless of those appeals, neither Advocate Downer nor myself will be required to appear in court again on this case until if and when the event that he succeeds in his appeal process.
And following on from this, the former president tried to bring an application to privately prosecute President Cyril Ramaphosa. That was also in court in the last couple of days. I presume one has to follow the other, unless he is able to bring a case against yourself and Mr. Downer. Well, then he can't really privately prosecute the president.
Well, that was one of the key arguments as to why President Ramaphosa succeeded in his challenge, where he invalidated the private prosecution against him. Of course, the former president is also, Zuma is also trying to appeal that. But essentially, the court said that in order for the president even to be a consideration of a prosecution, Advocate Downer would need to be convicted of those charges under the NPA Act. So one would imagine that the court striking the matter from the roll in this case may have an impact, but we know that President Ramaphosa brought an application preceding his appearance in court, which we were not able to do, which meant that he has never seen the inside of a courtroom in regard to this private prosecution. As you well know, Advocate Downer and myself had to appear in court. There was a lot of social media noise around that and what have you. But the president successfully brought an application to prevent that in his case. So his application, his litigation, has been slightly different to that which we pursued.
This entire case is about many, many things, Karyn, as you know better than I do. It's about you as a journalist. It's also about the National Prosecuting Authority. I mean, in a way, this is an existential threat to the NPA, isn't it? To have a prosecutor who is asked by the National Prosecuting Authority to lead a prosecution against a person. So Downer is the prosecutor who's prosecuting Zuma, the lead prosecutor in the corruption case. But to have a prosecutor in that position being privately prosecuted, I mean, it would be the end of the system as we know it if this were to happen.
Well, that was one of the key arguments that the NPA has made, that if you have a scenario in which, in order to force the removal of a prosecutor, you simply privately prosecute them, the implications for the administration of justice would be extremely grave. And bearing in mind the allegations against Advocate Downer had already been substantively dealt with in many respects by Judge Kuhn. Of course, Judge Kuhn did not close the door on a private prosecution such as the former president subsequently mounted, but there was never really any substantive evidence at all that Advocate Downer had done anything wrong. And so to utilize a case which was so flimsy on the facts, on the evidence, to essentially remove a career prosecutor who had done absolutely nothing wrong would set a very, very dangerous precedent for the administration of justice. And I think, the rulings that the courts have given in relation to this, and incredibly that substantive finding that this has been part of a Stalingrad strategy by the former president to himself avoid trial, I think is incredibly important. And I think those rulings are going to cast a very long shadow over the former president's ongoing corruption case.
Karyn Maughan, thank you, journalist at News 24, and of course the subject of this case as well. Really do appreciate the time.